Yeah, welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. Got a pretty interesting show for you here today. We're going to talk some NBA and not talk about LeBron James. Surprise, surprise, right? I'm sure he'll be back in the news pretty soon here. But regardless, we're going to talk some NBA, but we are going to talk about Michael Jordan, but we're going to do it from a different angle, and that angle is his arch nemesis, I guess, if he has one, but one Isiah Thomas and his recent appearance on the Draymond Green show. But before we get to that, if you're here on YouTube and you haven't already, please click that like, that subscribe, that notification bell. Make sure you're kept up to date and aware of whenever we drop new content on the channel. If you want the audio only version of the podcast, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Format Podcast. We should come right up. If you're enjoying the content, please make sure you give us that thumbs up, that 5-star review, and leave us a comment. We appreciate all that. Helps us rise in the algorithm, helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. And remember, every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, we go ahead and we do our live shows, and the turnout is good. We give you the opportunity to call in and talk to me directly. So looking forward to that. And yeah, let's get right to it. Okay, so I always talk about back in the day, the players having to go through the fire to reach the mountaintop. And then, whatever happens once you reach it, you reach it. Or if you never reach it, you never reach it. But you go through the fire and you fight to reach that pinnacle, that zenith, whatever you want to call it. And we talk about Larry Bird and the Celtics having to go through the Sixers. And then we talk about Isiah Thomas and his Pistons having to go through the Celtics. And, of course, Michael Jordan and his Bulls having to go through the Pistons to finally scale the mountaintop, right? And we talk about that. And Isiah Thomas was the undisputed leader of the Bad Boy Pistons. In my opinion, he's the second best point guard who ever played, one of the best to ever do it at the position, probably a top 20 all-time player, but regardless, an absolutely outstanding basketball player. He put his work in. He went to the finals 3 straight years. He won 2 of those, and maybe you can argue he got jerked on the first one, which is why he didn't win. But the point is, Isiah Thomas is an all-time great, and we know how vicious and contentious those playoff series were between the Bulls and the Pistons, the Bad Boy Pistons. And again, Michael Jordan had to get better, get stronger, keep coming back, keep fighting, not run and join another team or another player, another superstar to try to get over the top. But no, keep building his team, keep fighting, keep working, and finally get over the top and beat those guys to get to the NBA Finals. And then, of course, start winning championships. So Isiah Thomas is widely known for, I guess, leading the walk-off, and we're going to get to it, the walk-off of the Detroit Pistons after the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals, where they finally got overthrown and swept by the Chicago Bulls 4-0. And I guess we didn't know it at the time, but Michael Jordan harbored a deep, deep resentment regarding that for many, many years. And I guess Isiah didn't know it and Jordan didn't know it. But the point is, this has led to a major rift between them. And a lot of that came out during The Last Dance. During The Last Dance, we saw Michael Jordan kind of talk about how he felt about the Pistons walking off and how he was really offended, basically, that they didn't shake hands with the Bulls. And well, Isiah has a lot to say about that, but that was during the pandemic. So what's that, 2020? About 4 years ago. So ever since, Isiah's been in a situation where he's trying to plead his case in the court of public opinion in terms of, his side of the story. Michael Jordan obviously calling him an a-hole during The Last Dance and him being thoroughly offended by that, and him saying, swearing up and down that he had no idea that there was that much vitriol between the two of them over all these years. And it really is interesting because a while back I did a show on this very topic, talking about how Isiah was such a winner at every level of basketball he's ever been in, from high school to college. He won I think he won championship in high school, and then he won a national championship at Indiana in college. And then, of course, he won 2 championships in the NBA, multiple-time All-Star, Hall of Famer, did it all, right? Did it all. Again, one of the best to ever do it. And then, I did the show and I said, well, Isiah's won at every level, but he can't win this. And by this, I mean he can't win a battle in the court of public opinion against Michael Jordan, the guy who's widely regarded as the greatest basketball player of all time, one of the most influential basketball players of all time, a guy whose voice just weighs so much in the NBA. And I think there are very few voices in the NBA that have the gravitas that Michael Jordan's has. One is the great Bill Russell, who is now passed on, the dearly departed great Bill Russell. Another is probably Magic Johnson, of course, Michael Jordan himself, and then LeBron James. Maybe Kobe before he passed away as well. But definitely currently LeBron James, a tremendous voice with a tremendous amount of power in this league and in this game, and a tremendous amount of influence. So we, along with Isiah Thomas, had no idea that Michael Jordan felt like this. And, there were things over the years, rumors that you heard, Isiah Thomas being left off the original Dream Team, and the assumption being that Michael Jordan kept him off. Later, we actually found out that Magic Johnson played a role in that as well. If you read, I think it was When the Game Was Ours, you found out that Magic kind of admitted to playing a role in that. Magic was very offended by the fact that when he came out with his HIV, with the fact he made the announcement that he was HIV positive. At the time, HIV and AIDS were mainly and rather ignorantly thought of as diseases that only gay men get. And so Isiah Thomas, according to Magic, Isiah Thomas said something along the lines of maybe assuming that Magic Johnson was bisexual, and Magic was very offended by that. And so, he conspired along with Michael Jordan eventually to keep Isiah Thomas off of the Dream Team. So, all this stuff leads up to today, and Michael Jordan and Isiah Thomas just, pretty much flat out hating each other. And every interview that Isiah Thomas goes on now, he's trying to plead his case. Now, in his defense, it seems like he's trying to plead his case, but of course he's being asked the question, right? If you're interviewing Isiah Thomas, it's hard to interview this guy and not ask the question regarding, the Dream Team and his relationship with Michael Jordan and so on and so forth. But when you listen to Isiah talk about this, some things stick out, right? He talks about early and all the way through Michael Jordan's, the finish of his career. He always talks about how they actually had a good relationship, and he never thought that there was a problem between the two. So I thought that was interesting. And then also you think about it and you say, man, Zeke, you are trying so desperately to win over everyone, but Zeke almost makes it sound like he did nothing wrong and he was a choir boy in this situation. And as we know, there are generally three sides to every situation, right? There's there's one side, the other side, and then there's the truth. And the truth kind of lies somewhere in the middle of it all, right? Because you can't just take one person's side or the other person's side, because they're generally not going to give you the truly objective situation of how it all happened and what went down. But so I've got some clips from Isiah's interview with Draymond, and I want to play them for you. And there are three different clips. I didn't play them all at one time because it would be pretty long, but I cut them up, and then I'll come back and I'll give you my thoughts on each one as we go. So the first one, this was something that really interested me. I guess they all really interested me, but the first one, he talks about his early relationship with Michael Jordan when Michael Jordan arrived in Chicago. And of course, we know Isiah Thomas is a proud son of Chicago. So let's hear the first thing that he had to say about that early part of their relationship there.
As I said, my little nephew lived with Jordan, lived with him for 5 years. And then was a ball boy for the Chicago Bulls. And so my whole family was like, we were all interacting and everything else. The All-Star game, Michael Jordan's last All-Star game, I coached his last All-Star game. Vince Carter had won the starting spot. It's Michael Jordan's last All-Star game. I took Vince Carter aside and I convinced him to give his spot to Michael Jordan. He said, why? I said, because I gave mine to Dr. J when Dr. J wasn't voted on. That's how it goes, right? Vince Carter gave up his spot. Michael Jordan, we interacted, everything else. I never knew this dude felt the way he felt until the last dance.
Wow, really?
I'm like, all these years, you've been standing behind a tree throwing stones and letting somebody else take the fall for it. I never knew he had dislike and anger for me. Had I known, okay, I'm a grown man. I ain't got no problem. We cut from the same place. You know, at one point in time in my life, I used to fight really, really good. And I enjoyed fighting. You know, I can't do that as well as I used to now. But, but we wouldn't throw hands or anything. But I'm just saying, had I known you felt that way, I definitely would have treated you differently. But I was very gracious to him, not only in Chicago, but everywhere we went. I never thought there was any type of, you know, he, Ahmad, and I, when I stopped playing, we went out to dinner several times. So I never knew, like, until the last dance, like, this dude really felt this way about me. Now, some people will say, oh, Isiah, you should have known. How could you not know? Hey, I only know how people are with me when they treat me. Like when you and I talk, it's like, it's love, right? Now, if you walk away and you like dogging me, I don't know that.
Yes.
I only know how we interact. And when when he and I interacted, it was always good. So
that was interesting. I like that Isiah kind of broke down some of that, how they were. So one of the things that stuck out to me there was, obviously you've heard, if you're a basketball fan or whatever, you've heard the story of how Vince Carter stepped aside when he was voted an All-Star starter to give Michael Jordan that starting spot in his final All-Star game. I think that was 2003. And that's cool. Now, I had no idea that Isiah was the one who convinced him to do that. I guess he wasn't going to do that, which I find odd, right? Because they're both North Carolina guys. So I just took it as that when I had heard about it back then. Okay, you know, Vince and North Carolina, he says Michael Jordan, obviously he's the GOAT and he's stepping and he's going to play in his final All-Star game. So let me just be magnanimous here and give him my starting spot so that he can get all the due, get all of the praise that he's due. And that's cool. But I had no idea that Isiah Thomas was the one who pulled him aside. Now, here's the thing. Remember I said earlier, there's two sides, right? There's, one side, and the truth. So we don't know, and I'm not saying Isiah is lying, but it is interesting. We have no one to push back or respond to that and say that's how it happened. I would love to be able to ask Vince Carter or hear someone ask Vince Carter if that was the case and it went down that way. So that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting that Isiah says that after everybody finished playing, that they used to go out to dinner together and all that. So it seems weird to me, Michael Jordan being as notoriously petty as he is, that if he had a beef with Isiah, that he would have been doing all that. That seems weird to me, that they would have gone out to dinner and whatnot, or they'd have hung out, or they would have not had problems, etc. I think that's just kind of odd. So just listening to that, it seems as if Michael Jordan and Isiah had a decent relationship for most of those years. Although, if you also hear about it or do your study on NBA history, there's that whole thing about Michael Jordan having allegedly held that grudge from, I think, his first All-Star game because Isiah Thomas had allegedly orchestrated some type of freeze out because they thought that Jordan was basically getting too big for his britches at that point and he needed to kind of wait his turn. We'll never know if that's true. We'll never know if it's not. But yeah, all that really interesting. I really thought it was cool hearing Isiah talk about his take on the relationship that he and Michael Jordan had early on in Michael Jordan's career and then later on in Michael Jordan's career. So now we know that the next part is Michael Jordan obviously really, really holding the grudge that Isiah Thomas never shook. Isiah Thomas and the Pistons team didn't shake hands going off the court there. He really, felt some kind of way about it. Now, quick side note, Joe Dumars, I think, has since said that he sought out Michael Jordan and shook his hand before leaving the court. Joe Dumars has always been regarded as a class act in the NBA. And so there's that. But on the whole, the Pistons team didn't shake hands with the Bulls going off the court. So obviously, Isiah Thomas always gets asked about that. So he actually had another really interesting thing to say about it. And he gives a little history lesson, at least according to Isiah Thomas, about why that went that way and how it went that way. And it's really interesting. Me loving history of all kinds, but especially, hearing this NBA history. And again, you wonder, is this really the case? How he's playing it out, how he's laying it out. But let's hear what Isiah had to say, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Now, some people will say, well, why didn't you shake his hand? Let me give you all a history lesson, okay? The champions, and I went to every NBA Finals, Boston Celtics, the LA Lakers, Philadelphia, when they were all competing, at the end of the game, they always left the court and they would let the other team celebrate. And then they would come into your locker room after the game and shake your hand and say congratulations. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, y'all find me the tape in the video that showed them shaking hands at the end of their championship wins or losses. Show me the tape, show me the video where they all like shaking hands, where Larry Bird and Magic Johnson shaking hands. I want to see that. Now, in the locker room, you walk out, then you come back and you shake hands and you congratulate everybody in the locker room. So when the Boston Celtics walked off the floor on us, we understood the program. And you would see afterwards, Casey Jones, Jimmy Rogers, a couple of the players, they came into our locker room and they congratulated us. Okay? That's how it goes. Chicago, they're the only champion that still cries about somebody not shaking their hand.
So I asked you this question. I appreciate those facts. I got a couple questions for you. Number one, do you regret, like the way that all played out, with it almost being like, I mean, you were essentially, for lack of a better term, demonized for that. It was like, oh, that was Isiah. Isiah ducked. It was all Isiah didn't want to shake their hands because he got a thing against MJ. Do you regret that now in seeing how it all played out?
Of course, the way it all played out, right? Had we known that this would be the impact, of course, we all stopped and shake your hand.
So I love that he broke down the history lesson. And I think he does make a very valid point, because I've been around and I've watched the NBA for a long time, and I really don't recollect, at least not back then, anybody, shaking hands at the end of a conference finals loss or win, or a championship loss or win. I would really have to go back and check, but I really don't recollect seeing that. So it is interesting there that if that's the case, and again, I would have to go back and check, but I don't recollect it. But it is interesting if that's the case, that Michael Jordan held that as such a point of, he held that as something that he takes so much offense to. And I guess we know that, again, Michael Jordan is notoriously petty. And we also know that he's a dude who looks for any possible perceived slight to push him harder to reach that next level of greatness, right? We know that. We know that he's a guy who literally made stuff up so that he'd have a reason to go at somebody and destroy them in a random game. So hearing Zeke talk about that, I thought it was really interesting. But here's where I do have a question. Draymond, he does a pretty fair interview here, and it's not, the whole interview is over an hour long. You can check it out on the Draymond Green show. And he's not just talking about this, but he's talking about a lot of things. But in that situation, if I'm giving the interview, and of course, I am a trained journalist, I would have asked, okay, got it. So Isiah, let me ask you this, based on what you just said, were you or other of your Pistons teammates planning on going into the Bulls locker room after they celebrated on the floor, finally getting past you guys and slaying the proverbial dragon? Were you planning on going into the Bulls locker room and, shaking their hands and wishing them well in the next round for the Eastern Conference? Because I found it interesting. If you were to listen to the whole interview, Draymond just let that go. He didn't ask that question. And so when Isiah was saying that and I'm listening to the interview, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Like, okay, cool, I get it. But to your point, with the other teams that went into the locker rooms afterwards, were you and your guys planning on doing that? Because all that probably would have squashed all of this if he'd have gone in there afterwards, said, hey, Mike, man, tough series. I admire how you guys came back and got better and better every year. Best of luck to you in the NBA Finals. That's all you have to say. That's how it goes. But yeah, real interesting. But definitely liked the history lesson there. Liked it a lot. But yeah, I would have loved to hear what Isiah would have said if somebody had asked him that question. All right. So finally, the next part of this whole thing is, as we know, I mentioned this earlier, Michael Jordan is widely held as having kept Isiah Thomas off of the Dream Team. Also, like I also said, Magic Johnson has in the past years come out and admitted that he played a role in that as well. And so Isiah Thomas had some interesting commentary on that. So again, this whole thing is just so interesting that Isiah Thomas he seems to paint himself in a rather angelic light. He also paints himself in a way like, I never knew any of this was happening. Now, some of it sounds feasible, viable, but the rest of it is kind of like, really? I don't know. But let's hear what Isiah Thomas has to say about missing out on the Dream Team. And I don't know because I don't know him personally, but this seems to be something that has truly burned him all these years, missing out on the opportunity to be a member of the greatest team ever assembled in the history of American sports, maybe in the history of sports, period. In terms of greatness, in terms of winners, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you often look at it and say, man, and I know I do, that Isiah Thomas should have been on that team. But let's hear what Isiah had to say about it, and then we'll come back and we'll finish this video out.
I never thought like, okay, I wasn't going to make the team. But when I looked at who they picked, it's like, okay, well, they picked this guy, they picked John, they picked this. Now, and then I started thinking, okay, well, and you always want to make the team. Okay, I'm like, okay, but Larry hurt. Magic ain't even in the league no more, right? Stockton injured. Okay, I got a chance. It never crossed my mind that I wasn't on a team because Michael Jordan didn't want me on a team. And by the way, at that time, you're not thinking like somebody would have that much power because that was their first championship. Now, I won 2, should have won 3. Magic and Bird, I think, had 5. Magic had 5, Bird had 3. I had 2. We had won the most championships in that era. So I didn't. Absolutely. I wasn't thinking like, it just wasn't crossing my mind. Now some people will say, "Oh, Isiah, you should have known that," but that ain't how I operate. That ain't how I think. I wasn't like going to, oh, this guy didn't want me on the team, that's why I'm not on the team. And then it started coming out weeks later, well, Jordan don't like Isiah, he didn't want him on the team. And then Michael Jordan did an interview, or he made a quote, and he said, hey, I had nothing to do with Isiah not being on the team. So why wouldn't I take him at his word? That's what he said. Last Dance said, oh, this dude been lying for a long time. That's when now you see me like, wait a minute.
Okay, so so the first thing I thought when I heard this was, okay, Michael Jordan, he made the statement back then saying I had nothing to do with Isiah not being on the Dream Team. And I don't really respect that as a man. Like, you don't like this dude, step up and say it. But, Michael Jordan was making tons and tons of money as a marketing guy, as a role model, et cetera, et cetera. So he's not going to do anything to ruin that pristine image. So looking back, I get it. But if that's the case, why all these years later would you come out and admit that you kept him off the Dream Team? I really don't understand that. If that's what people believe, or that's what people thought, or that's what was reported, then that's fine. Let them believe that. Let them think that. Let them believe what's been reported. But you don't have to come out and confirm it. Because think about it. If Michael Jordan doesn't come out and say all this stuff, call Isiah an a-hole, tell that he kept him off the Dream Team, blah, 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 we don't have to hear all this stuff. These guys can go on. We don't have this feud. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. And I think you can tell by listening to all of this and listening because Isiah's done various interviews on the topic. You can tell that this is a guy who would much rather squash all this, right? But it's not going to happen. We heard Charles Oakley, who's very close with Michael Jordan, say it's not going to happen. Michael Jordan hasn't even spoken on it. And again, he's notoriously petty, so that's not going to happen. And even if it was going to happen, the conditions that Isiah Thomas is putting on this it's definitely not going to make it happen, because Isiah is saying, because later in the interview, Draymond asked him, hey, is this situation repairable? Can you guys, rekindle a friendship or whatever? And Isiah is like, basically, where it is, it can't be fixed. He said the only way it could be fixed is, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, Isiah said the only way this could be fixed is you insulted me, called me an a-hole on national, international TV. So we want to fix this. You need to go on international TV and apologize. And if you can't do that, then we got nothing to talk about. Well, Isiah, you know that you're going to have nothing to talk about, because Michael Jordan is not going to do that. Now, I wish you guys could squash it. I really wish you could have a sit down. Like, I wish Magic could orchestrate that and maybe be in the middle of it. I heard, it was probably like a couple of years ago, Shaquille O'Neal said that he may attempt to orchestrate a sit down and help these guys squash it. But it's not going to happen, man. Michael Jordan is just not going to do it. He is notoriously petty. That's the type of dude he is. At least he's not passive aggressive about it, right? Zeke knows he doesn't like him, and that's that. So, I understand that when Zeke gets interviewed, they ask him these questions and he feels the need to respond about it and really expound about it and give his whole side and explain it all as he sees it. And I totally get that. But, man, it's unfortunate, because in all of this, it's being lost what an absolutely incredible player Isiah Thomas was. It really is. And all people are seeing is that, Michael Jordan basically is sunning this dude, and he's going around doing what looks like, crying and begging for the situation to be resolved, or for people to take his side. And it's just not going to happen, because, as we talked about before, Michael Jordan is one of the greatest, most influential, most powerful voices in the history of the NBA. And so, Isiah, like I've said before, you are one of the greatest winners. You won on every level, but you can't win this. All right. So that's what I got on this topic. Really interesting topic, I thought. So I definitely wanted to get on here and share that with you guys. But if you haven't already, please go ahead, click that subscribe, that like, and that notification bell. Need you all to do that. And don't forget that Saturday night at 7 p.m., we got the live show, and looking forward to it. Let's go ahead and build up the audience for the lives, and make sure you guys call in, and whether you like what I have to say or you don't, I'm looking forward to some pushback on the things that I say, because I get a lot of it here on YouTube, so it's all good. But yeah, look forward to seeing you next episode, and I'm out. Peace.